Okay, good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here. This is the first of 5 sessions of this little module, previously called Meditation 101, and trying to just do it a little differently this time, calling it How to Meditate, and basing a lot of it on this book called How to Meditate. This is an earlier edition. I think the new cover doesn't look like this. So before we start, let's, well, this is the start. Let's just do a couple of minutes meditation on the breath. If you know how to do that. If you don't, we'll be talking about it more later. So just sit comfortably, keep your back straight. And bring your mind inside, away from external objects of distraction, mainly sense objects of the 5 physical senses: sight, smell, hearing, taste, and touch. And then once you've brought your mind inside, keep it away from internal distractions, mainly the discursive, chattering mind, the scattered mind that wants to run here and there. Then find your breath where it goes out and comes in through your nostrils, and that point where you can just feel your breath going in and out. So just concentrate there. So then generate a strong determination. Think to yourself, now I'm going to focus on my breath without allowing myself to become distracted by anything whatsoever. So with that determination, focus on your breath and just try to keep your mind on it for as long as you can. And as soon as you notice that your mind has gone off your breath, just drop whatever it was that distracted you and just come straight back to your breath. So now hopefully our mind is a little calmer and clearer than it was before. So look into your mind and check your motivation for being here at this session. Ask yourself, why am I doing this? So if you find that, your reason for being here tonight, your motivation is simply concerned with trying to gain some kind of benefit in this life alone, and recognize that motivation is coming from a negative mind, the mind of attachment. And as such, that's a negative motivation. Following attachment leaves an imprint on our consciousness, an imprint we call a negative imprint because it ripens into suffering, which is just what we don't want. So that needs to be replaced by a positive motivation. So we'll talk more about motivations later, but we will replace it now with the highest motivation, which is called bodhicitta. Bodhi means awakening, citta means mind. So we generate the mind of awakening, the mind seeking enlightenment, the mind seeking enlightenment, not for ourselves alone, but for all sentient beings. So briefly, we can think, the purpose of my life is to lead all sentient beings from suffering to enlightenment. In order to do that, I have to develop my mind along the path to enlightenment. And the way I develop my mind along the path to enlightenment is by meditating. Therefore, I'm going to participate in this session on meditation in order to reach enlightenment for the sole purpose of enlightening all sentient beings. So generating this sort of enlightened motivation is how we try to begin all our sessions. Okay, thank you. So some names I recognize, some I don't. Is anybody here for the first time? Because I can't see you, I don't know. Okay, Robert, is it?
Nick, if you click on view and then go to gallery view, I think you should be able to see most people.
Well, yeah, I am, but some people just have their name.
Oh.
Trey, first time?
Yes, I am here for the first time.
Who's that? Dalane?
Dayani, yes.
Diane. Thank you. Okay, so well, let me ask, who will I ask? Robert, why are you here?
Actually, just to clarify, I'm at this center for the first time. But I'm relatively new. But I'm down by where you taught yesterday in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
So why am I here? I'm struggling getting this meditation down well. So I'd like to, be able to. I guess I'm set with rules and how to do things, and I should sit there and just follow the breath. But that's, as I'm sure here is a lot harder than it seems.
Yeah, well, that's the way we begin. And yeah, it is. If you're not used to it, it's like anything. You try something new, then it's not as easy as it gets after with practice. So the thing about the mind is that the more we do something, the more familiar it becomes, the easier it gets. And in fact, the Tibetan word for meditation, which is Gom, I guess we transliterated G-O-M, Gom, it means to familiarize. So meditation is making our mind familiar with certain objects, and the objects we try to make our mind familiar with are positive objects, positive states of mind. And such as wisdom and love and compassion and understanding and so forth. So that's what we try to do. Okay, what about Dayane?
Yeah, it's almost the same thing. I have been meditating, I think, a few months, and I want to improve it because, yeah, I get a little bit lost sometimes, and I want to do it better.
Okay, well, let's see if this helps. Who else? Lee, is it your first time?
It is. I caught the last of your classes in the last 2 weeks ago.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I just want to look inside myself, get a better understanding of some negative feelings that are within me that come out, and
okay, well, we'll see if we can help you deal with those. Anybody else want to say anything at this point? Okay, so in the course description that was on the Kurukulla website, and I don't know, wherever it was publicized, there was a link to an article I wrote 20 years ago for Kung Fu magazine, of all things. So I thought I might, that sort of is an overview of the whole thing. So we won't be doing any Kung Fu, but, well, unless you want to. But I think this is going to be more of a mental activity than a physical one. So did anybody read that article? Too much to expect? All right, well, anyway, you can find it there, called Meditation in Tibetan Buddhism. So that's what we're doing now. So anyway, the preamble was, I just started off how I got into this. I won't tell you that right now. But I was traveling in Southeast Asia, and I wasn't interested in anything spiritual at all. But in Thailand, I saw, temples and monks and Buddha statues. So as a dutiful tourist, I thought I should learn a little bit about the culture of this country that I was spending some time in. So I got a book on Buddhism. It was called Buddhism, by English High Court judge called Christmas Humphreys. He started the Buddhist Society in London back in I think around 1915, actually. And he I think he came from a background of theosophy. But anyway, he started the Buddhist Society. And so I got this book, and I started reading it in Laos, and he emphasized the importance of meditation in Buddhism. So I didn't really know what that was, but made a mental note to find out. And then probably a couple of months later, I found myself in Kathmandu, and a friend there told me that there was a meditation course starting the following week at a small monastery just outside of Kathmandu, a monastery called Kopan Monastery. And there were two Tibetan lamas there, Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche. And unusually for the time, they taught in English. So my girlfriend and I went up there to check it out. And I was supposed to meet a friend in Kathmandu and he wasn't there, so I had to wait. And then we found out it was much cheaper to do this meditation course than stay in a hotel in Kathmandu. So that kind of clinched the deal. So we did this 1 month course with Lama Zopa Rinpoche. He was the main teacher. And, you know, it completely changed my life. I finished up staying there for 5 years, becoming a monk, and which I remained a monk for 12 years. So this is what I've been doing since almost 50 years now, working in the organization that was started by these lamas, Lama Yeshe, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, from that small monastery in Nepal. From that monastery grew, you know, and all the students who passed through, has grown this, you know, fairly large international Tibetan Buddhist organization. And Kurukulla Center and the center in Florida, Tupunkunga Center, many other centers, you know, there are about 160 now, of centers, services, projects connected with this organization. So, you know, I think if someone had told us back then what was going to happen, we wouldn't have believed it. But here we are. So, so I learned a lot of things, obviously, in that first month, and I've learned a few more since. But now just to read from what I wrote in this article, the main thing studied in Buddhism is the mind, but not the mind in general, so much as one's own mind. And actually, I found the learning process extremely scientific and not particularly at odds with my medical training. So I left Australia in May '72, about 5 or 6 months before I did this meditation course. And prior to that, I'd been practicing medicine for about seven years. The teacher laid out the principles of Buddhist philosophy and psychology, and we would then think about them, subject them to critical analysis, and meditate on them, using these teachings as a mirror for our own mind. So, you know, when we are studying Buddhist teachings, we're listening to Buddhist teachings or reading Buddhist teachings, that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to use them as a mirror for our mind to see if we can see ourselves reflected in the teachings, to see if we can recognize ourselves. And that was one of the things I gained, I think, from this 1 month meditation course. And that is, I felt I'd been introduced to myself for the first time. You know, I was 31, but I felt I hadn't really known myself until I did this meditation course that explained so much about the mind. So day in and day out for 30 days, we got up early, meditated, listened to teachings, meditated, discussed, listened to more teachings, meditated, went to bed. By the end, while still not accepting everything I'd heard, I knew I had to stay to find out more. So, as I said, I finished up staying there at the monastery for another 5 years, and then I've been involved in the organization. After that, Lama Yeshe, our main teacher, sent me to Delhi, to India, to start a meditation center. So it was a bit of a challenge, but finally got one going in Delhi. It was a challenge, part because there was no money, and there was only one student in Delhi. Most of these other centers, like Kurukulla Center and other centers, have started because the students or people there in the area requested the lamas if they could start a center. Most of the students who passed through the monastery in Nepal, who did the courses there, and the one I went to in 72 was the third one that the lamas had given. The first one was in 1971 in the spring. The second one was in the spring of 72. And the third one, the one that I went to, was in the fall of 72. And then in 73, there were two more in the spring and the fall. 74, there were two more in the spring and the fall. And in 74, the lamas started traveling to the west. And that's how a lot of the centers got started. When the lamas would go to certain places, the students there would ask them if they could start a center. So sometimes they agreed, sometimes they said no, but gradually over the years, that's how it built up. So then from 75 on, because the lamas were traveling so much, there was only one meditation course at the Kopan monastery one a year. And last year, it was the 52nd. So obviously this year there is not being held. So most of the students who came there didn't hang around like I did. They went back. I mean, some of them just, that wasn't their thing, so they drifted off to find something else. And but a lot of students went back to the West, and they felt they'd gained a lot from Buddhist teachings and wanted to share them with their family and friends. So that's why they started inviting the lamas to come. It was easier to bring the lamas to the people than so many people to go to Kathmandu. So I stayed to find out more. So there I found out that the mind and the body are interrelated but completely different in nature. That the body is physical, made of atoms, it has shape and color, whereas the mind is formless. It's clear light in nature and has the ability to perceive objects. So as such, as the body is physical and the mind is completely non-physical, there's no way that the mind can come from the brain. So I said that because when we're talking about cause and effect, or cause and result, the result has to be similar in nature to its principal cause. So since I say this because up until that time, everybody I knew thought that the mind came from the brain, that the mind was a result of electrical or chemical or some kind of unknown activity in the brain. And here we were taught something different. In fact, the course started by, the first one or two talks Lama Zopa Rinpoche gave were about, what is Buddhism and why we should practice it and what are the benefits and so forth. The first philosophical teaching he gave was the topic was the mind is beginningless. So, you know, that was kind of a surprise for scientific materialists like myself, who always thought that the mind was the result of, came from the brain. It was a result of some kind of mental activity in the brain. But since the brain is physical and the mind is non-physical, the mind can't have a physical principal cause. So the conclusion is that the mind proceeds from a previous state of mind. And so we'll talk a bit more about the mind as we go. So here, what I said was the body starts at conception, the mind is beginningless. At conception, the consciousness, which comes from the previous life, enters the fertilized egg. So, you know, our body as a result comes from our parents, you know, father's sperm, mother's egg. But for those products of conception to be viable, to become a baby, to become a person, the consciousness has to enter as well. So according to Buddhism, there are three things coming together at conception: the sperm, the egg, and the consciousness, which enters the conjoined sperm and egg, and that forms the embryo, that creates the embryo. So each individual's previous lives are infinite in number, and it's one's own discrete stream of consciousness that passes through them all. Thus, our present mind is the result of everything we've ever been and done, and our future mind and lives depend upon what we do today and, you know, the rest of our life. So this is the same for all of us. Okay. So the good news is that all sentient beings have the potential to reach enlightenment, the highest possible state of mind, you know, the ultimate development of mind, everlasting blissful happiness, because we all have clear light nature of mind. Enlightenment is what the Buddha himself attained way back in India more than 2,600 years ago. It's what he shared with his disciples and what's been taught by a succession of Indian, Tibetan, and other masters in an unbroken lineage going back to the Buddha himself. So a sentient being, so all sentient beings have the potential to become enlightened. A sentient being is a being whose mind is ignorant. A Buddha is a being who was once a sentient being, but became enlightened by totally purifying his or her mind of ignorance and fully imbuing it with qualities of compassion and wisdom. Buddhist meditation teaches us to cleanse our own minds of ignorance and the other delusions that spring from it, such as attachment, jealousy, pride, and hatred, which obscure our mind's clear light nature and are the actual cause of all the suffering we experience. So Buddhist meditation teaches us to cleanse our mind of these negativities and to develop desirable attributes such as love, compassion, tranquility, concentration, and divine intelligence, which are the cause of all happiness. Generally speaking, Buddhist meditation is of two types: analytical and concentrative. In analytical meditation, we use our powers of logical reasoning to examine the teachings to determine for ourselves whether or not they are true, to eradicate doubt, and to come to a clear and unshakable conclusion about the way in which things exist. Analytical meditation. So the way these meditation courses were structured, and the reason that I believe that this organization, such as it is, has been successful, is from the way we were taught. Is the way we were taught from the beginning. In that, as the Buddha himself said, and something that impressed me at the time too, was that the Buddha said that what I teach is true, but don't believe it just because I said so. And I think he had to make that point was because, I can't imagine what it would have been like to be in his presence, but it must have been extremely powerful. Just the enlightened energy radiating from him. And just his charisma and presence probably would want to make you believe whatever he said. But he said, don't do that. You analyze my teachings. And he used the example of a goldsmith who, if someone goes to a goldsmith with a lump of metal and says, here, do you want to buy this gold? The goldsmith is going to check it out. And the way they do it, apparently, or the way they did, I don't know how they do it now, probably have some kind of spectrograph or something, but spectrographs in India, 580 BC. So he said they, like a goldsmith, assays gold by rubbing, cutting, and melting. So I guess they rubbed it, they cut into it, they heated it up till melted, and I don't know what, but they checked it out in every possible way. So he said that's the way to examine his teachings. Just think about it. Do they make sense? Do they accord with the world as you see it? Do they accord with your own experience? Things like that. So everything I say is true, but don't accept it just because I said so. You have to analyze it for yourself and prove it true for yourself. So the way we do that is through analytical meditation. And that's what we did at these meditation courses. Lama Zopa would give a teaching, and then the next session we would meditate on the teaching. We would think about it, analyze it. Did it make sense or not? Did it sort of harmonize with the other teachings that had been given or were being given? Were the teachings internally consistent, or were they contradictory? So we had to look at it in different ways. And a lot of us had never studied Buddhism before. We hadn't meditated before. So it was really like being thrown in the deep end. On the first day, we had to stagger up the hill. Some of us were staying in an old schoolhouse down the hill. It was cold and dark. It was 5:30 in the morning. We weren't used to getting up till lunchtime. And we went into this little temple and had to sit for an hour and a half, having never meditated before. So it was quite an experience. And but anyway, that's how it went on. There were teachings given, and then we had to meditate, had to think about them, analyze them. Analytical meditation. So that's one of the two general categories of Buddhist meditation, analytical. The other is concentrative. So in concentrative meditation, we learn to focus our mind single-pointedly on a mental object until our mind can rest effortlessly on that object for hours or even days at a time. So that sounds pretty unlikely, but so what we just did before is a very brief example of concentrated meditation, trying to concentrate, focus on the breath. And strictly speaking, the breath is not a mental object. Breath is, well, not even strictly speaking, the breath isn't a mental object, but it's a way of beginning to train our mind. You know, a mental object, for example, would be, and the one that we practiced a lot during these meditation courses, was we have to create a mental image of the Buddha. So there are there was I don't know if you know what a tanka is. A tanka is a Tibetan painted scroll. So there are all kinds of tankas. I mean, you can't see it there, but there's one behind that Buddhist, it's Maitreya Buddha, and above there is a tanka. It's painting of the Buddha of Wisdom, Manjushri. So we, in the temple at Kopan, there was a large tanka of Shakyamuni Buddha, the founder of these teachings, and that we had to create a mental image of the Buddha and then focus on that. So if you haven't meditated before and you start trying to do visualization and then focus your mind on that, it's a little difficult. So we start by meditating on the breath because of it's a sort of a subtle physical object, and it's a way of getting into meditation, concentrated meditation. And even experienced meditators, when they're starting a meditation session, they'll often kind of warm up by focusing on the breath for a while. So although they're quite different in nature, these two types of meditation, you know, analytical, concentrative, they assist and support each other. The better we can analyze, the greater our conviction for practicing concentration and trying to overcome the obstacles to success. So, you know, when we, as you might have even experienced just before, trying to focus on the breath, it's very hard to keep the mind on the breath. And so we find the breath, we put our mind on the breath, and after a very short time, few seconds, our mind wants to go somewhere else. Breath is not very interesting at all for our mind. You know? So then we bring it back. And, you know, there are other words for concentrated meditation. Another one is, it's called placement meditation. So we have to place our mind on the object. Really, it's replacement, because our mind goes off and we have to replace it, and it goes off and it comes back. We have to keep placing our mind on the object. So that can get kind of frustrating. You know, some people have more of a natural ability and actually enjoy trying to focus the mind on an object. Other people, like me, find it very difficult and kind of get bored with it pretty easily and want to give up. So analytical meditation comes in, where you have to kind of explain to yourself why the benefits of persisting. You know, what will I get out of this eventually? You know, and so we kind of have to understand the benefits of developing single-pointed concentration, and you kind of talk to yourself to get back into it and to make the effort and to overcome the obstacles, whatever they are. So the better we can analyze, the greater our conviction for practicing concentration, trying to overcome the obstacles. And the better our concentration, the stronger our powers of logical deduction and the clearer the conclusions we reach. So that makes sense. You know, if you're trying to think about something, if your mind, again, keeps wandering off on different tangents, then it's difficult to follow a train of thought through to its logical conclusion. So the better our concentration, the easier it is to focus on the topic at hand and to, you know, understand the process of logical deduction that leads us to a conclusion of that particular topic. So, you know, one of the first analytical meditations we did was on this idea that the mind is beginningless, that the mind, you know, our mind didn't start with this life, with this brain, but came from a previous life. And when this life finishes, our mind, our, you know, consciousness, our stream of consciousness will continue on into a future life. So, you know, my initial reaction to hearing that concept proposed was to reject it, just because I'd never heard it before. And I thought, well, if that, and, you know, there are a lot of strange and unusual teachings in those first week or two, and I was quite vocal in my objections to these different ideas that Lama Zopa was teaching. And you know, somehow I had this idea that perhaps I was the person that Buddhism had been waiting for 2,500 years to prove it wrong. So I kept interrupting, and with, you know, what I thought was my incredible intellect and you know, university training and so forth. And eventually other students, especially those who weren't there for the first time, told me to shut up. So I shut up and started writing my questions down in the back of my notebook. And then what I found was that as the course progressed, that the answers to a lot of these questions came. Just, you couldn't get all the answers in the first day. And so by the end of the course, by the end of the month, you know, a lot of these, I found the answer to the question, and, you know, there's still quite a few remaining. I don't think I still have that notebook with questions. I'm sure there's still a few unanswered ones, but that's what happens as we get deeper into the subject. The questions do get answered. So what's the point of all this? Why make all this effort? Well, we all want to be happy, and none of us wants to suffer or experience any kind of problem. But obviously our wishes alone are not enough to bring all this about. We rarely find the happiness we desire, and when we do, it doesn't last, and it usually isn't as good as we'd hoped it would be. Furthermore, we're constantly experiencing one problem after another, running into undesirable situations, not finding what we want, losing what we have, you know, not to mention getting sick, aging, and at the end of it all, dying. To understand Buddhism's explanation of why our lives are like this and what we can do to improve them, we need to understand the Buddhist worldview. So as I mentioned before, there are two kinds of beings with mind: sentient beings whose minds are ignorant, and enlightened beings from whose minds every last trace of ignorance has been eradicated. So there are two kinds of living beings with mind. There are enlightened beings and there are sentient beings. So sentient beings are also of two types. There are those in cyclic existence, which Sanskrit word is samsara, and those who are free of cyclic existence, outside of cyclic existence. So two kinds of sentient beings, those within cyclic existence and those outside of cyclic existence, but not yet enlightened. Within cyclic existence, there are 6 realms. So this is the Buddhist worldview. 6 realms. There are 3 lower, the animal, the hungry ghost, and the hell realms. And there are 3 upper realms, the human, the demigod, and the god realms. So most sentient beings have been in cyclic existence, dying in one realm, being reborn in another since beginningless time. And so that's our history, You know, our mind has been around since beginningless time. Our stream of consciousness has no beginning. This time, it's occupying a human body. In a previous life, who knows? In our immediately previous life, who knows what life our mind came from? But since beginningless time, our mind has been circling through these 6 realms. And mostly in the lower realms, which are the realms of the greatest suffering. So beyond the wheel of life, as I mentioned, there are 2 states of existence, individual liberation and the enlightenment of Buddhahood. The point of Tibetan Buddhist meditation, the ultimate point of all Buddhism, in fact, is for all sentient beings to attain enlightenment. But enlightenment can be attained only through individual effort. We have to do it for ourselves. Buddha cannot do it for us. And the way to enlightenment is to follow the path that leads to enlightenment. The first thing to understand is that it all begins with motivation. So that's what we emphasize at the beginning. Whether an action becomes positive karma, the cause of happiness, or negative karma, the cause of suffering, depends on why it's done. All actions done with attachment to the happiness of this life alone, actions done simply for the comfort of this life, are negative. The karmic imprints such actions leave on our consciousness eventually ripen into an experience of suffering. Actions done with the motivation of experiencing happiness in a future life, actions done with detachment from this life are positive. The imprints they leave ripen into happiness. So there are 3 kinds of positive action, 3 levels of positive motivation. The first is that seeking happiness in a future life within cyclic existence. So rebirth in the upper realms. If we do an action recognizing, with the wisdom that recognizes that this life isn't all there is. And I think most people think that this life is all there is. You only get one life. So if we have the wisdom of seeing there are future lives and aiming our actions at least at not being born in the lower realms, getting a better future rebirth, then that's a positive action. That's the lowest level of positive motivation. The second is seeking complete liberation from cyclic existence for oneself alone. So there we think, well, what's the use of having the positive motivation of wanting to get a better life in cyclic existence for its own sake? That's like being in prison and fighting hard to get, one of the better cell, get a cell on the top floor or something. It's still in prison. So as long as we're in cyclic existence, even if we get better lives, like this one, that life is going to finish. We're going to die. And the chances are strongly that we'll be reborn in the lower realms. Because nearly all our actions have been done out of ego, ignorance, attachment, and aversion. So the second level of positive motivation is doing action in order to get complete freedom from cyclic existence. So that's based on, renouncing the temporary happiness that we spend a lot of our time seeking, and renouncing all of cyclic existence and trying to get complete freedom from it for oneself alone. So the third level of positive motivation, the highest one, is the one we tried to generate at the beginning, which is seeking enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. So, understanding that in the final analysis, all happiness comes from other sentient beings, and that it's one's individual responsibility to lead them all to the highest happiness of enlightenment. Actions done with any of these three levels of motivation, positive motivation, plant the seeds of harmonious results. So positive karma always results in happiness. So Tibetan Buddhist meditation always stresses the importance of the third or the highest level of motivation, which is known by its Sanskrit name, bodhicitta. Everything we do should be motivated by the supreme altruism of wanting to see all sentient beings enlightened. If it is, we ourselves automatically also experience good results. This paradox, if you want to experience the greatest happiness, forget about yourself and devote yourself solely to the happiness of others, is what His Holiness the Dalai Lama calls wise selfishness. Since we're going to be selfish, we might as well be smart about it. So that's why selfishness. If you want the best for yourself, forget about yourself and strive to obtain the best for others. Then as a sort of byproduct of that way of thinking, you will get the best for yourself. Thus, the benefit of our actions is not determined by the action itself, but by our motivation for doing it. If, for example, we meditate for selfish reasons or for some mundane goal, such as tranquility now, makes me think of Serenity Now. Anybody watches Seinfeld? And Festivus is coming up. Serenity Now. If we meditate for serenity now, that's just for this life, it's not positive. Okay, sorry, sidetrack. If we meditate for selfish reasons, even though it might look as though we're doing something spiritual, in fact, because of the worldly motivation behind it, that action will leave a negative imprint in our mind and is therefore the cause of suffering. So that's why I said at the beginning, if we're trying to learn about meditation because we heard that, we can get some kind of peacefulness out of it, we'll get some clarity of mind, we'll be able to forget our troubles, things like that. That's not a positive motivation, even though it might bring about that result in the short term. In the long term, it's leaving a negative imprint on our consciousness, and that negative imprint, like a poisonous seed, will ripen eventually into suffering. So Tibetan Buddhism teaches us to do everything with compassion, thinking about the suffering of others and wanting to alleviate it. In this way too, even everyday actions such as sleeping, eating, and working can be transformed into the cause of enlightenment. So analytical meditation is usually practiced on the teachings from the graduated path to enlightenment. This path structure is another feature of Tibetan Buddhism, wherein all the teachings of the Buddha have been arranged in a logical, stepwise order that makes them easy to understand and practice. When I saw the steps of the path laid out, like a mental roadmap to spiritual perfection, I thought, now I've witnessed a miracle. So it's really true. You know, if we accept that there is a spiritually perfect state, I mean, my entire secondary education, until I went to university, was at Christian schools. First, I went to kindergarten and first or second grade at a Baptist school, and then I went to a Presbyterian private school, Presbyterian college, and we had assembly every morning with singing a hymn and a Bible reading and a prayer. And we finished with the Lord's Prayer every morning. And once a week, the school chaplain came and gave us some kind of Bible instruction. None of that really took for me. I didn't accept any of it. My parents were sort of card-carrying atheists anyway. We had no religion at school, even though my parents were Jewish. We weren't religious Jews. First time I went to a synagogue, I think I was 22 when one of my Jewish friends got married. So, even as a kid, I could see that, the world was full of suffering, and yet we were being taught that God created everything. So it seemed to me like a pretty faulty creation that he's supposed to be all loving and all powerful, and God created everything. And yet, even the Christian teachers, the school chaplain was one of the nastiest people I'd ever met. And these, they talked a good game, but, they go to church once a week on Sundays, and then the rest of the time they were kind of really nasty. A lot of, these teachers and so on. It just kind of didn't really make sense to me. I don't know that I ever really thought, what was it about? Why were they teaching this? Why were they believing this? But anyway, I couldn't relate to it at all. Then later on, when I was 15 or 16, a couple of my Christian friends sort of tried to pressure me into becoming a Christian. And when I told my mother, she freaked out, and she gave me a book by Bertrand Russell called Why I Am Not a Christian to read. So that saved me from that particular downfall. Why I'm saying that is because, the idea of spiritual perfection, as I understood it in Christianity, was God. God was the ultimate thing, but there was never any teaching that we could become God. God was God, and we were sort of lesser. And so you could never, if God was spiritual perfection, you could never attain that. Maybe the best you could hope for was to become the Son of God, but that job was already taken too. So, but here in Buddhism, the Buddha, as enlightenment, Buddhahood is spiritual perfection. But the Buddha wasn't always a Buddha. Buddha was like us. Buddha was once a sentient being. He was a sentient being who eradicated ignorance by following a path such as this and became enlightened. So, enlightenment is possible because the delusions, ignorance, attachment, aversion, all the other ones that you mentioned, they're not one with the mind. The mind is like a clear blue sky, and the delusions are like clouds. Eventually they can dissipate, or they can be gotten rid of. So, the delusions, there are antidotes to the delusions. And by applying those gradually over a period of time, we can gradually eradicate the delusions altogether. We can eradicate the delusions, and we can eradicate the imprints of the delusions and become enlightened. So there is a state of spiritual perfection. We can attain it. And here is a roadmap, how to get there. Hundreds or thousands of steps. But we can go from one to the other. And it's all laid out before we even embark on the journey. We can see where all the stages we have to pass through. Like, if you're driving from Boston to Los Angeles, you get a map and you see where the road goes, and you can see all the towns and cities that you're going to pass through. So it's like that. So I just felt that was kind of like a miracle, that there's a clear path to spiritual perfection, and before you even set out on it, you can see what it is and where it leads and how to get there. So I thought that was amazing. So to think that every step on the way to developing our minds to their fullest potential has been so clearly explained, and that by generating these realizations in our mind, we can become essentially one with God, was mind-blowing. So I don't have room to outline this path here, but I encourage those who are interested in these teachings to look more deeply into them. So this is written for Kung Fu magazine. You will discover how to make life meaningful and fulfill the purpose of having been born human this one precious time. Okay, so that was kind of the commercial for Tibetan Buddhism, given to readers of the Kung Fu magazine. So concentrative meditation usually starts with learning to focus on the breath. This is an important technique akin to stretching before physical exercise. The ideal recommended meditation posture has 7 features. Okay, so now we get into it a little bit. So I don't know how you're sitting, like chairs mostly. So sit cross-legged on the floor, preferably in the full or half lotus position with a cushion beneath your buttocks. So you can sit in a chair, and if you do, you should keep your feet flat on the floor. Or if you're short like me and your feet don't reach the floor, put a cushion there and rest your feet on a cushion. The main thing is to keep your back straight. And that's one reason why we sit on a little cushion. If your backside is slightly higher than your knees, it's easier to keep your back straight. So that's the second point. So I think you know what a full lotus is, or a half lotus. The full lotus, you're the back of your left foot goes on, rests on your right thigh, and then your right leg crosses in front of your left, and the back of your right foot rests on your left thigh. Anyway, if you look at paintings of the Buddha or statues of the Buddha, you'll see that's how he's sitting. And the right leg always crosses in front of the left. The half lotus is where your left foot rests on the cushion, just on not on the little cushion you're sitting on. So we have this zabuton here, this kind of large square cushion, which is 2 or 3 feet square, and then the little one on top of it. So in the half lotus, your left foot rests on the zabuton in front of your little cushion, and then your right leg just comes on top of your left thigh. So it's easier. Half lotus is a lot easier than the full lotus. If you sit in a regular cross-legged position, it's a little easier for your sciatic nerve to get compressed, and then you get pins and needles down your legs. So and while sitting in a chair is okay, I think if you're doing retreat, if you're doing serious meditation practice, it's probably easier to sit for longer periods of time if you're cross-legged on the floor. So it's worth trying to develop that, unless you have some physical reason you can't do it, at all. But we need to work into it gradually if you're not used to it, because you can get all kinds of troubles in your hips and in your knees and in your back. So if you're not used to that way of sitting, then it should, we should get into it somewhat gradually. Okay, so that's sitting on the floor or in a chair. Second point is to keep your back straight with your vertebrae one above the other like a pile of coins. So your back should be straight, And keep your arms slightly rounded and away from your body. So like that. So half lotus, and then keep your arms slightly rounded away from your body with your hands in your lap, palms upward, right on top of the left with the tips of your thumbs touching. I missed the third point. The third point is keep your shoulders level, not one higher than the other, sort of parallel with the floor. So cross-legged on the floor, keep your back straight, shoulders level, your arms like slightly rounded, a little bit away from your body. Right hand top of the left, tips of your thumbs touching. Then while your back is straight, your neck is bent slightly forward. So I say, so if you gaze straight ahead, your eyes would hit the floor just 4 or 5 feet in front of you. So not like that. But, if your neck is straight or even back a little bit, it's too easy to get distracted. If your neck is too far forward, it's too easy to get sleepy and sluggish. So, bend your neck slightly forward with your chin tucked in a little bit. Then close your eyes lightly or open them slightly with your gaze down the line of your nose. So for beginners, it's probably can be a little bit easier to start with your eyes closed, not kind of scrunched closed, but just lightly closed. Because if they're a little bit open, it's too easy to get distracted by something in your field of vision. But with your eyes closed, usually when we close our eyes, that's a signal to go to sleep. So we don't want to go to sleep in meditation. So the professional meditators will keep their eyes slightly open. And if you look at images of the Buddha, his eyes are kind of half closed. And that lets a little light into your mind. So that keeps your mind a little brighter and more awake if your eyes are just slightly open. And when they are, you're not looking anywhere, but they're sort of your eyes are your gaze is just down the line of your nose. But you're not really looking at anything. Because your concentration is on your breath. So your concentration is so strong on your breath that you don't even register something in front of your eyes, even though they're slightly open. Or if you're visualizing, you're seeing, whatever you're visualizing. So then the seventh point, the last point, is also close your lips and teeth lightly. So your lower jaw is relaxed, but your lips are closed, especially in India. Otherwise, you get flies going in your mouth. And the tip of your tongue touches the roof of your mouth, just behind your top teeth. So it's said that, experienced meditators, when they have strong concentration, the flow of saliva increases a little bit. So if your tongue is resting against your hard palate behind your top teeth, then you don't have to swallow. The saliva will just run down your throat. So you don't have to consciously swallow all the time, So those are, that's called the Vairocana position. Vairocana is one of the aspects of the Buddha. And you may have heard of Milarepa, the great Tibetan yogi. His teacher was called Mapa, and Mapa, the translator, they lived around 10th or 11th centuries. Mapa used to go to India to get teachings and bring texts back and translate them from India to bring them back to Tibet. And he claimed this position, this posture, as his own, and he always boasted that there is no better posture for meditation than my posture, this one, that has these 7 points. So I've just repeated them here in this article that you can link, that I've been reading and you can link to. So once you're seated comfortably, generate bodhicitta motivation, thinking, I'm going to meditate on my breath in order to reach enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. Then bring your attention to your breath, focusing your mind on the entrance of your nostrils, where you can feel the air entering and exiting your body. Breathe normally. The difference being that you are now paying full attention to your breath. So keep your mind on your breath, but don't think I'm breathing or something like that. Just let go and let be. However, if it helps you focus, you can count the breaths, seeing how high you can go, how many you can count, before you discover that you've lost concentration and your mind has gone off on something else. At that point, drop whatever's distracted you like a hot potato and immediately come back to your breath. So this is the way to begin practicing meditation. Okay, that's pretty much all I'm going to say tonight. But happy to answer any questions, or anyone has any qualms about anything I've said, please feel free. Actually, I should also say that during these talks, if at any time you want to ask something, just jump right in. It's not an interruption, it's part of the experience. Anybody? Wow, was that clear, was it?
I have a question, Dr. Nick.
Sure.
When we're just trying to concentrate on our breathing, should we be thinking anything else, thinking of mantras, or is it no analytical meditation, just focusing on the breath itself?
It's just focusing on the breath. We're trying to develop single-pointed concentration. So that's exactly what it sounds like. It's a single thing that you're thinking, that your mind is focused on, and anything else is a distraction. Even, if you're feeling incredible compassion for all sentient beings, or love for all beings, and wanting others to be happy and free from suffering, when we're doing single-pointed concentration, even those virtuous thoughts are, which would normally be encouraged, are a distraction. So it's just the one thing. Last time I did this module which we called Meditation 101, there was a program that I followed, and there are a whole bunch of, I don't know if anybody did that, anybody who's here, but there are a bunch of handouts, and it's the way it's recommended to teach this module by our parent organization. But and Sean, who'd been doing these classes for several years, these Monday nights before me, I think always taught, followed that outline and with those handouts. So I'm just going to do it a little differently this time, and maybe in the fourth or the fifth session, we'll look at the details of developing single-pointed concentration. But in the meantime, I just want to recommend this book, How to Meditate, from Wisdom Publications, because we'll be following some of this. And this is really, I think, probably the best book for beginning to understand and practice Tibetan Buddhist meditation. There's I mean, you know, there's a life's work right here. So if you can get that, that'd be good. Anyway, so Bonnie, like that, just. So what I was going to say is, as we practice developing single-pointed concentration, I mentioned before that you can keep your mind focused on the object of meditation for an hour, for a matter of hours, or even days at a time, and that's true. The highly accomplished meditators who develop single-pointed concentration can remain with their mind absorbed in the object for literally days at a time, and without need to eat or drink or go to the bathroom, and just sustained by kind of psychic energy. And the experience is just called rapturous ecstasy. So rapturous is good, ecstasy is good. Rapturous ecstasy is beyond the imagination, and that's only a minor goal. Single-pointed concentration. Single-pointed concentration. So those who are absorbed in single-pointed concentration, they feel like their body and mind are completely filled with joyous bliss. I haven't experienced anything like this. I'm just, this is what I've read, and so, it's a highly desirable state, but we're not allowed to get attached to that, because if we get attached to that, if we don't see developing single-point concentration as a tool that we need to develop in order to cut through the veils of ignorance and have an experience of direct experience of ultimate reality, then we're making a mistake. So developing single-point concentration, it's like sharpening a knife, not just for the sake of having a sharp knife, but for using that knife to cut things. So here we're developing our mind to become like a laser that cuts through the veils of ignorance, so that we can understand and perceive and have a direct experience of ultimate reality. That's an ultimate reality. That direct experience of ultimate reality is what frees us from cyclic existence and speeds us on the path to enlightenment.
Sorry, I have a follow-up question.
Sure.
Will the single-pointed concentration meditation help me in my analytical meditation?
Absolutely.
Analytical meditation, I have that down, but to sit and try to concentrate on one thing, I find very difficult for me. So,
well,
if
yeah,
there's any pointers you could give me.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, like they support each other. Analytical meditation supports single-pointed, concentrated meditation when we find it hard to concentrate, when our mind gets tired of trying to bring our mind back from distraction, to avoid distraction, to avoid kind of getting sleepy. We can stop the single-pointed concentration and do analytical meditation on the benefits of developing single-pointed concentration. We talk to ourselves, explain to ourselves, you have to persist with this because the benefits are so unbelievable, rapturous ecstasy, single-pointed concentration, penetrating to the heart of reality. I mean, we enthuse ourselves by explaining to ourselves the benefits of developing single point of concentration. The better our concentration, the better we can keep our mind on analysis, on analyzing a topic through to its logical conclusion. The thing is that what we're trying to develop is wisdom. One of the things we're trying to develop is wisdom. You know, basically there are two things we're trying to develop, like the two wings of a bird, the wisdom and method. So both are important to reach enlightenment. The method is compassion and bodhicitta. That's the way we create a lot of merit and enrich our mind and develop bodhicitta, the principal cause of enlightenment. Wisdom is the other main thing we need to develop. And so there are three levels of wisdom that we're trying to develop. The first level is called the wisdom of hearing, or the wisdom of, like I said, when I went to my first meditation course, one of the first things that Lama Zopa Rinpoche taught was the mind is beginningless. So, I hadn't heard that before. I thought that was kind of a ridiculous concept. But prior to that, I didn't know that even the concept existed. So that was the wisdom of hearing. I heard something for the first time, and as we study these teachings early in the piece, we learn a lot of things for the first time, and that's called the wisdom of hearing, or the wisdom of reading, or learning something new for the first time. So as with the mind is beginningless, so you have the wisdom of hearing, you hear this for the first time, you think, oh, okay. So that ignorance of not knowing about the mind is beginningless is removed. So then doubt arises. Maybe the mind's beginningless, maybe it's not, probably not. That was my tendency, but maybe it is, they're teaching this. So let me think about it. So then you think about it, you analyze, what is the mind beginning? Well, what is the mind? What is its nature? Does it make more sense for this mind, which is formless and has the ability to perceive objects? It was more logical? It comes from something similar in nature, like previous state of mind, or it comes from physical matter, it comes from the brain. So, and what are the consequences of the mind being beginningless? So anyway, you analyze this concept from different angles, and eventually you try to come to a conclusion. So if you come to a conclusion, correct conclusion, yes, the mind is beginningless, that is, for me, that was completely opposite to what I've always believed. So I have this very strong tendency to believe there's only one life, there's only one, just this mind that I have in this life, that I have this strong tendency to believe the mind is not beginningless, that the mind doesn't continue after this life. But through my logical analysis tells me that's wrong. So I analyze, I come to a conclusion, and then you focus on the conclusion. And again, that's where a single point of concentration is so important. So through clear analysis, you come to a conclusion. And if that conclusion is different from what you've habitually believed, then you really have to focus on it to sort of displace the ignorance of that particular topic with the understanding, the correct understanding. So you really focus on it single-pointedly. The mind really is beginningless. So gradually, the wisdom displaces the ignorance. of that topic. And as I said, there are, you know, on the graduated path to enlightenment, there are these hundreds of steps. Each one is a topic to be meditated on, to be thought about, to learn about, to get the wisdom of hearing, the wisdom of contemplation, the wisdom of analysis, to analyze that topic, come to a conclusion, and then to develop what's called the wisdom of meditation, where that correct conclusion displaces the ignorance of its opposite in your mind and becomes another little step of wisdom on the path to ultimate wisdom of enlightenment. So that's how we develop on the path. We meditate on each of these hundreds of topics and each one logically leads to the next. The way the path is laid out is extremely logical. And so along with meditating on each of those topics, there are kind of ancillary practices we do. So it's like a seed. The meditation, the topic is like the seed of the realization, or the seed of the wisdom of meditation that we're trying to gain. But just like a seed of a plant, we can't, the seed itself isn't enough to bring about the plant. It needs the right conditions. So we have to plant the seed in the earth, we have to water it, it needs sunshine, it needs minerals, whatever it needs, to grow into a healthy plant. So, you know, the seed of the realization or the wisdom of meditation is the topic that we meditate on. Mind is beginningless, impermanence, death, I mean, all these different topics. But along with meditating on the topic, we need to cultivate or prepare our mind through practices known as purification and creation of merit. So purification is like if you're going to plant seeds in a field, first you want to clear the field of all the rocks and broken glass and weeds and all the other debris you might find in a field, and smooth out all the hills and make it very nice and you know, clear all the rubbish away and make it nice and flat. So that's like purifying our mind of all our wrong conceptions and delusions and you know, bad habits and so on and so forth. So then once this field that you're going to plant a crop in is cleared and flattened out like that, then you fertilize it. And then you water it and you make it ready for planting the seeds. Then if the field is perfectly prepared, the seeds that you plant in it are going to grow into a nice crop. So with our mind, we have to purify our mind through certain practices, and then we enrich it with certain other practices as well. So, so along with meditating on the path, these different topics, we have to do other practices that you know, purify and enrich our mind, so that our meditation will be more efficient and more successful more quickly. And, you know, a couple of other things we do, but that's kind of the main point. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Welcome. Okay, so as we've seen, you know, the motivation is really important. So we started with the right motivation, and I think pretty much what I've been talking about is in line with what the Buddha taught, what the Lamas have taught us. So with the right motivation and the right action, we have actually created some merit, which is, what we need to enrich our mind. So, but merit is a very precarious thing. It's very precious because the merit is one of the main causes of success in our actions, in our positive actions. So to protect it, there's a third thing we do at the end of the action, which we call dedication, where we kind of seal that merit or sort of confirm the motivation that we generated at the outset. So it's, it's not complicated. So we think of this positive energy, positive karma, this merit that we've created through doing this action of the last hour and a half with the bodhicitta motivation, the right action, so that we dedicate the merit by thinking, because of this merit, may I quickly reach enlightenment in order to enlighten all sentient beings. So by dedicating the merit, like putting it into a bank, locking the door, we protect the merit from being destroyed by anger. If we get when we get angry, it's like a fire in our mind, it burns up positive actions we've done if they haven't been dedicated. If we generate wrong views, we have doubt that overtakes us and we think, oh, I think these teachings on karma are nonsense, or, there's no such thing as enlightenment. I think, these different negative minds can arise from time to time, wrong views. So they also destroy our merit. So if it hasn't been dedicated. So when we create merit, we really want to dedicate it so that it remains in our merit bank, and gradually we can build on it until we reach enlightenment. So we just dedicated it. That was it. Okay. So homework is, if you're going to come back next week or ever, homework is to practice sitting in the right meditation posture. And the link to, my article is there where it explains the 7 points clearly. And practice meditating on the breath. And try to get some experience of that. And then we'll see where we are next week. Okay? Okay, well, thanks everybody, and hope to see you next Monday. Thank you.